Eric, I'm going to give you a scenario.
I'm ready.
It's not going to be our normal scenario. Don't worry. I understand we have to keep this like PG or whatever. Okay, so it's third deadlift. We're at nationals. And you need to be motivated for nationals to do this final deadlift attempt. What are you thinking? Like, what do you tell someone if you need to absolutely guarantee them to be motivated to lift that third deadlift no matter the circumstance?
I would probably say maybe something like my grandmother is underneath the plate on the left, and my grandfather's on the plate on the right, and they can't even reach each other to die holding hands, and someone just needs to get those plates up. So you go out there and you pull that deadlift.
Wonderful, horrifying image. My only question is, when you tell the lifter that, do you reference like your family or is it their family? Are you saying like it's my grandmother, grandfather that you have to pull off, or it's theirs? That's the only part I was confused about with our next guest.
Well, I think to get serious for a second, not really. It really comes down to your coaching style. So
Sure.
if you are a autonomy supportive coach, then it would be the athlete's, family, because you can use their own internal motivations. Sure. However, if you're an authoritarian coach like me, where you make the athlete only care about pleasing you and hate themselves otherwise, then it's absolutely my family. Because then when they miss, you come back and you can go, way to not only lose the meet, because you didn't go 9 for 9 even if they won, but you also killed my grandparents. Then you don't like give them a high five, shake their hand or anything. You just walk away.
Yeah, and that emotional debt is you sow the seeds of not their own destruction, but actually their reconstruction to be a better self. Not emotionally better. In fact, they'll be devastated, likely for years. The traumatic counseling they'll need, they'll never be the same. Will be irrevocable. But nonetheless, hopefully the next nationals or worlds or whatever they perform 5 kilos better. Worth it.
Absolutely. I mean, the champions are born, some would say out of fire. I would say out of emotional abuse. So same thing, just a metaphor, really.
Man, Eric, we have a fantastic episode, and those I like this how we do it because we always record the intro after we do the episode, and it kind of bookends it where that's a reference to something that we get into at the end of this episode with dual athlete Ann Rutherford. She basically did what we wanted to do, that is win the 2017 figure Jordan Cup, also be a junior national champ in powerlifting. So she's done both things at the highest level, and now that she's officially part of the Iron Culture team, we can say we are collectively the champions.
Yeah, so she was I think the tall division winner in the figure 2017 Jordan Cup. I think it was the pinnacle of the IFPA. Now it is still a very, very top level, especially in the pro division OCB show. Even more than that, she won the overall, not just the division, for the WNBF overall figure title in 2017. So 2017 was a huge year for her. In addition, she actually placed second in the Arnold powerlifting competition. You heard it right, folks. Went 9 for 9, had a great, fantastic day. And as also Omar alluded to, she won the 2015 USAPL Nationals as a junior. So she's not like me, where because if I was to focus on only one sport, I would just be slightly better than mediocre. I've chosen to be mediocre in two and always just pretend that I would be a world champion if I chose one. She actually is a national and a world champion in two sports simultaneously. So we just had to get her on to talk about it.
No, she's a fantastic guest. She's also a coach, a reputable coach. There is one minor correction that I want to make just before we begin this episode, and that is that it was curious she omitted in terms of her references, who inspired her, who got her into this, Eric Helms, and that was clearly, sometimes when you gaze at a star, it could be blinding, right? And it's kind of like the Platonic cave, where to someone, when you're in the cave your entire life and you finally go outside and there's Eric Helms, double biceps, what's up? It could bewilder you. It reorients you and you have no idea what happened. And you almost forget the impact it had. So I think it was, when confronted with you for the first time, it was just a honest omission, but one that I want to bring back in and say that, wow, while Eric's going to talk about himself as something, mediocre or whatnot, the impact that so many different coaches have had, it's been fantastic to see. To be serious for a second, because she references Lane, and I mean, you guys at 3DMJ, that she's one of the OGs, so she can talk about 2011, like, the knowledge scarcity that existed, and then really getting passionate about it. And so it's really cool to see the participants from that era, and then who helped bring about that era, and then what happened as a result, and where we are currently. Like, seriously, it's kind of like a cool reflection episode, and then where we're going in the future.
Yeah, I mean, she might have been blinded by the light, but the rest of the episode, she was revved up like a deuce. So, I mean, she crushed it. And definitely, if you want to know why I was talking about grandparents being crushed by a deadlift, you're going to have to stick around to the end, folks, because that is the surprise cherry on top of this episode. So definitely take a listen to this whole one, because it's a fantastic one.
Eric, we did it again.
What did we do, Omar?
We are champions by proxy of our guests because, once again, this is a collective. It's Eric and myself atop the pyramid, clasped, hands holding, looking down upon everyone else, judging and extracting, monetary compensation from them. But we can safely say now, legally, our very real legal team in Delaware said, yes, you guys could say it for this episode because you're our team, that we are world champions. And let me just say, Eric, if you could describe what it was like being a 2017 figure champion, you look dashing. So if you could just describe it for everyone.
Well, let me just say that it was a challenge being not only the 2017 IPE male bodybuilding world champion because we had Sam Okinola on, but also, but also in the same year at the WNBF World Champs to not only place second in the heavyweight division as Sam Okinola, but then also to win the figure division. And overall, it was a rough year. I mean, I had to learn how to walk in heels. It was pretty,
That's quite, you pulled that off. That's incredible.
And what have you done, Katie Ann?
I mean, I was right there in support.
Oh, yeah. Emotional.
I was backstage, just, going from the posing trunks to the bathing suit and, the figure suit. So I was there for support, tanning, helping with all that.
Yeah.
So I'm a part of the title, too. I mean,
and we literally, a small part, yes. But in all seriousness, folks, we literally couldn't have done it without Katie because she was the one who was actually the 2017 WNBF figure overall champion. Welcome to the podcast. How you doing, Katie?
I am doing wonderful. I'm excited to be on. So thanks for asking me to come on, and can't wait to chat.
No, it's an absolute pleasure, and the honor is ours. I think for those who listen, we like to talk about people who take various pathways in the iron game, be that anything from as mainstream as powerlifting, which is not mainstream at all, to niche as like Highland Games. But often we like to have people on who said, I will not walk but one path. Mm-hmm. Nay, I will choose two. And you've done that. So not only are you the 2017 WNBF overall figure pro world champion, but you also won, I believe, Raw Nationals as a junior back in 2015. Is that correct?
Yeah, that is correct. That was a long time ago.
It wasn't that long ago, and it
feels like forever ago. I don't know.
For sure, especially with how fast the sport is growing, which we were talking about off air. But I would say that 2015 was when the sport really did start kicking off. So that's not to take anything away from your accomplishments, because you were right there in the mix as it was blowing up. And I think your last meet, correct me if I'm wrong, you did place second in your division at the Arnold, right?
Yes. Yeah, that was my last meet. It was 2017. The Arnold went 9 for 9, which was, I think I only went 9 for 9 twice in my entire career, and broke the 1,000 total, which was one of my goals. And got second place, and then decided right after that to start dieting for a show.
That's awesome.
So that was 2017, and then ended up competing, having my pro debut in 2017, and then winning the tall title for the Yorton Cup, and then the overall WNBF world title. So that was pretty darn exciting. It was a very exciting year, looking back.
Yes.
A lot of stuff going on. Yeah.
And can I just say that for those who don't know, winning a pro card is an impressive feat in natural bodybuilding. But winning a pro show is even more impressive, and I think that's really where the rubber hits the road. And winning a world championship title is, of course, just as impressive as it sounds. But to do them in the same year, I think it really speaks to your talent as an athlete. So you're very welcome. So I'd love to hear a little more about your background. How did you get into both of these sports, and why did you choose to say, nay, I will take two paths instead of one?
Well, I've always been an athlete my entire life. I have two older brothers, and so that really influenced me growing up. I was just always wanting to do what they were doing, and they played tennis, ran track, did all kinds of different athletic endeavors, and I was in the weight room with them as early as like 10 or 12, and I just wanted to follow in their footsteps. And I was actually a competitive track runner and was planning on running on scholarship in college, but then had a mishap where I got a really severe stress fracture and then ended up having some complications with it. And it really, long story short, just kind of took me out of the running game, both physically, but also mentally and emotionally. So I decided to just ditch that goal and maybe possibly walk on as a track athlete in college. My specialty was the 800 and the 1500, so mid distance, not a sprinter. I can't sprint to save my life, even though I do a strength sport and bodybuilding, but it doesn't make much sense. But mid distance, and then I just fell in love with the weight room in college and just wanted to research the crap out of nutrition training. I found actually Layne Norton on when he kind of was first coming out with his YouTube videos, and that was in, I don't even know, 2011 or 2012. And I was like, okay, this is what I need to do in order to be successful. And I want to follow in the footsteps of some other individuals that I looked up to in the industry, like Erin Stern. She was one of my first inspirations. And then I actually had a IFBB pro figure gal who's my track coach in middle school. So that was like my first exposure to all of that. And so I thought she was just the most gorgeous. I thought her physique was just absolutely incredible, and I wanted to look like that. But it didn't really align with my running goals. But then I got injured. So I was like, well, I'm going to go for it. So started training and then just really wanted to compete. I have no idea why I had it in my mind that I wanted to compete in bodybuilding as a 19-year-old girl, but I just saw the physiques and saw Erin Stern and Nicole Wilkins, and I thought that was the most amazing thing and wanted to do it. So fast forward to 2013, I actually randomly just emailed Layne Norton about attending one of his seminars in Columbus, Ohio, which is where I'm from. And that's where the Arnold Classic is. So it happened to just be a pretty small group of people. And I was able to get a lot of one-on-one time with him. And we just really hit it off. And I just was like, would you want to be my coach? And so he saw that I was pretty darn strong, and he was like, you should powerlift. And it was always a real, like, almost like a release in the gym where I would go in and I wouldn't be focused just on my physique, but I would really be focused on my performance, which is always something that I've loved to do as a runner. It wasn't like how I looked. I was like, I just want to be strong. I want to be stronger than the boys in the gym. Like, I just want to crush it, and always have had this like real drive within me to just be successful at whatever athletic endeavor that I was focused on. And so when he said powerlifting, I was like, well, heck yeah, I'll take that as a challenge. And so so he started coaching me, and then ended up, we just had a really great 2014 together. He was my first great coach. I had some other coaches previous to that, just when I was younger, but my first really solid online training coach, who then I ended up being able to go to his camps and work his camps eventually, and really build a relationship with him and a lot of other individuals in the industry, which led me to some great associations like my current coach, Alberto Nunez. And so, just really opened the doors. I know he's the best. Shout out to Alberto.
Shout out, Alberto.
So it just all kind of happened. And that's what led to competing in both powerlifting and bodybuilding in 2014, and then kind of started everything at that point.
No, I love it. And Omar, I mean, how many times do we hear that real sports loss is bodybuilding's gain? And it often does come in the face of injury.
Yeah, we get all the casualties, And I was thinking, though, when you did say that about being a mid, 800 meter, 1500, that powerlifting is actually a pretty low velocity sport. I mean, I think if you are a sprinter and all those things, you certainly can make the change. But kind of that feeling you get when you run an 800 and then doing an extended set for bodybuilding, I think those are probably a little bit more similar. But my one pressing question before we go on, Katie Ann, would be, before any of your third attempts, going 3 for 3, 9 for 9, winning, junior nationals, did you ever say to yourself, let's roll? Or did you ever say to yourself, they said you were done, they said you had no chance? I got you, babe?
That was in my mind the whole time. Oh yeah, I was repeating it and yelling it over and over. It was like a track in my mind.
Good. I was just shout out to my second hubby, because Eric is my first, and I noticed when you're citing references, you did omit Eric, which I took as a personal slight that I'll later rectify somehow. Don't you worry how, because Eric's my one and only. Ben's a solid second, but y'all should listen to Ben Escrow, the song "Let's Roll" that he wrote with. You heard it with Ryan Doris.
Oh, it's amazing. It's amazing. Yeah, that was like back when I was kind of in, around them more. And I remember he had that, I think it was like 2015 or something. It was, and I think he gave it to Lane for Christmas. And that was amazing.
The Let's Roll EP. Anyways, Eric.
Yep. So I was not aware of Let's Roll until another friend of the podcast, Dr. Mike Zerdos, shared with me that track.
Dr. Mike, yes. I have to just say he was honestly probably one of the biggest influences on my powerlifting journey from the beginning.
Is omitting you, Eric. What?
No, I'm telling you, there's so many Venn diagrams there where we actually have.
Well, Eric's been the biggest influence on me over the last few years. Let me just say to Iron Culture, all right?
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Well, he was, I remember just really kind of, when you're a beginner, I think in any sort of endeavor, you always have a lot of doubt, like, could I actually be good? And I'll never forget one of the VIP camps that I went to. It was with Ben, and he helped me with my deadlift. And then Mike looked at my squat and he was like, you're going to be good. And I was like, really? So that was like kind of a pivotal moment where I actually had confidence in what I could maybe accomplish and had someone who believed in me, which is so important. And I really want to, as a coach myself now, that's something that I think is so important, is like encouragement. And, there's so many negative messages out there, but being able to encourage someone, you don't know if like that one word of encouragement is going to make a huge difference. And I can specifically think back to multiple moments with that group of people, and they were so encouraging that it was like kind of a click. I was like, all right, let's do it. Like, let's go for it.
Let's roll.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's roll. Let's roll.
Right. No, that's, I look back fondly into the 2010 to 2013 period where I think, actually that was like version 2 Lane Norton. I'll just say that the version 1 we're talking was the bodybuilding.com forums. See, I dieted for my first show in 2007 using his contest prep guide that I think he'd created the year prior.
Okay.
Yeah, we're talking like HTML code to enter your weight, spits out macros, tells you how many refeeds to do. Those are the classic days. And then he actually was he helped me prep for my 2009 prep. So yeah, I'm an old school Lane head, if you will.
Old school Team Morton. Oh yeah.
That's right. But no, I very much remember, Aaron Stern being kind of like the icon in figure. And, for me, another one that was really impressive to me was Michelle Shepard, who was competing in the WNBF. Just an amazing athlete. So yeah, the era that you came from is one of my favorites in the sport because it has a lot of nostalgia for me. So I think that's really cool. So you had the confidence built and kind of the encouragement to get into powerlifting from the Zerdos Norton kind of era where I'd say Lane Norton was probably the first iconic quote unquote power builder that was in the evidence-based scene as kind of YouTube started kicking off. So it was cool to see that you ran with that. I wonder, because I personally am really glad that I got into powerlifting early on. Actually, first, for those who don't know, my first meet was before my first bodybuilding show, because I've always had the ability to focus a little bit less on my body, which I think you have to do as a physique competitor, but it can lead you to some dark places or just being unhappy, especially in the off season where you can't really as a natural see much progress sometimes. To be able to focus on my performance and see something objective as a way to focus on progress, I think more than any debate about whether powerlifting training is appropriate for bodybuilding or the adaptations, how much do they cross over, what's the best way to do it, put all that aside, I think mentally some of the biggest benefits are being able to have a vessel for shifting your mindset from your physique to something like performance. Have you found that?
Oh, 100%. 100%. It was probably one of the biggest blessings in that first season, because there definitely is a tendency to overanalyze everything when you're bodybuilding. I have found it just, your physique, your weight, your pictures. Am I seeing more shreds? Am I going to be ready? And with powerlifting, you definitely have a level of like, okay, am I going to hit my lifts? Am I going to, but it's really like just going into the gym and doing the work. It's not so much like these little nitpicky details. Oh crap, I got regular. Fun fact, I one time downed like half a pack of regular soda instead of diet, and it was during my prep. So, things like that, like external stresses of being so on point with my macros or my cardio or my steps or whatever it may be. And being in the gym and training for powerlifting was so mentally healthy and beneficial, because I wasn't just focused on what I look like in the mirror. If I was like having kind of a bad body image day or just sort of not feeling ready, I went into the gym, crushed a new PR, like volume PR. I was like, I feel pretty dang good right now. So that was one of the huge benefits of simultaneously doing both. And I would agree with you, it might not be ideal, but at the same time, you also have to remember that we're not science projects. Like, we're not in a lab and we're just, everything's controlled. We have a life, we have emotions, we have all kinds of things that we deal with. And so how can you best strategize to have a program that's going to be beneficial to you for whatever goal it may be, but also be healthy for you mentally, which I think is often a part of competition that's not looked at is, okay, is this external stress of this program too much for you and it's going to lead to a mental breakdown? How can we shift some things to help you? Because I've seen a lot of individuals, just in bodybuilding who have unfortunately just kind of succumbed to all of the sort of, pressures of being perfect in every sort of way, which you can never be perfect. But if you have that outlet in some way, I think it can be very healthy.
That's well said. You mentioned science projects, and Omar, something that we've talked about many times is just how siloed the fitness industry is, and a huge part of why Iron Culture exists is to try to bring connections. But I always wonder, like, what is it that draws certain people to a more science-based approach? Because certainly bodybuilding is not that unless you run into the right crowd. It's very much kind of like, here's what other people do, and it's very tradition-based.
Yeah.
So, Katie, I'd love to get your thoughts on maybe why did you find yourself in this community, community that kind of values the quote unquote evidence-based approach? How did you get here? And especially not to denigrate your track coach who's an IFBB pro, but I typically find when people get exposed to an IFBB pro in their first encounter, that person might be awesome, but they find a very different world than the world that we find ourselves in happening most of the time. So I'd love to hear that.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because I found myself totally engulfed in that other world of very random nutritional plans, very unexplained cardio plans, very, well, this is how I do it, so just follow it. As a 18-year-old girl, I had some coaches just here locally, and I wanted to do a contest prep. I, first of all, should never have been in a contest prep. I did not have enough muscle. I was not mature enough. But it was just like, okay, well, dollar signs, we'll just throw this meal plan at her and throw this cardio. And I've always just been an individual who like questions the why, like, why are you giving me this? And so in that period of time, in my first like 2 years of getting really consistent with training and really consistent in that realm, there was no why. It was always just because I said so. And I said, well, that's not a good enough answer. And I actually had more success dieting on my own with counting calories and counting macros, which I don't even know when I first learned about that, than following these meal plans, because those meal plans led to low blood sugar. I was like practically passing out on campus when I was in college, and then I would binge. And so it led to all of this up and down. And I said, there has to be a better way. Like, this doesn't make scientific sense. If my maintenance calories are 2,400 calories, why are you giving me a 900 calorie diet plan? It makes no sense. So it was more so just like a frustration of feeling like, I feel like I know more than them, but yet I don't even know what I'm doing. So I was like, there has to be an answer. So that's when I really started to dive into, I'm not even sure how I found the science-based kind of initially. I think it was like early college and maybe like 2011 or something. And then I found like Sohee Lee, I found Lane Norton, I found all of these amazing resources, and they were telling me we've seen this, which is what I was experiencing, and it's wrong. And here's a better way to do it. And I thought, oh, I finally found the answer. Like, this makes sense. So that's when it initially, like, I was like, I'm going full force into this realm because it 100%, it scientifically makes sense. And I've always just really had an interest in that. And not just doing something because someone tells me to do it, like, tell me the why behind it. And for the first time, I had individuals who could tell me why specifically I was doing something, not just trust me because I'm all knowing, type of attitude. So that was really refreshing. And also they were encouraging. I had always been in circles that were a little bit just, I would say, toxic, or just kind of like, I felt bad about myself every time I was there. No one told me that I was doing a good job. It was like more so along the lines of like, oh, you're looking a little puffy today. You need to go on the treadmill for 30 minutes, that kind of feedback. So it was just really unhealthy. And so when I finally found this community and they were so supportive, I was like, this is incredible. So then that's when I just was like, this is it. I'm going for it.
When I listen to you, it sounds like there is a natural skeptic in there somewhere who likes to understand the why. Because that's my question. Is you mentioned this was while you were in college. Do you think it was your education or your studies that kind of oriented you towards having wise and scientific answers, which I think are the same thing, honestly? Or do you think that is just something that's in you?
I think honestly, it's just something that's in me. Because even from a young age, when I was running track, I found a scientific track. I mean, I was like a 15-year-old and I was reading his name was Jack Daniels, and he was one of like the top track coaches Jack Daniels, not the drink.
He has some great post workouts.
If you didn't know, they also have a running program. But he laid out scientifically why there should be tempo runs, why there should be speed work, why there should be long runs. So I think it's been more so in how I was brought up. My dad, his background is scientific, and he just always was questioning things and like the why. And he worked in, his major was chemistry. And so just growing up like with that, and he actually was by trade a pharmacist. He's now an entrepreneur, but that was always something very interesting to me because he was wired that way. So I think it was more so like my growth as a young child and in that. So that took me through college for sure, but I actually don't have an exercise science degree. I have a finance degree. And then it was right when I got my finance degree, actually kind of ironically, that I just like full force dove into going to seminars and really like trying to get as much mentoring as I possibly could in the industry. Because I was like, I want to quit my job and coach. So that was my motivation, was really being able to leave some place that I didn't feel passionate about and go and really try to fulfill my calling.
Well, it seems like it's certainly worked out, and to the benefit of everyone else in the industry. We're glad you're here.
Thank you.
Yeah, let's circle back to the training, and you've mentioned how it's not necessarily a scientific experiment, but really what honestly like serves someone's passion and keeps you involved and mentally healthy while you're doing something. Given that, which I think is that should be the first constraint, like, does this excite me? Because I've personally, as someone who competes in strength and physique sport as well, I've had numerous times where people are like, well, why don't you just choose one and try to be better at it? And the answer ultimately is I'd have less motivation. So I'd have to be someone else to do that, to get those results that you think would be better. But since I'm not, this probably is the best pathway forward to me. So given that, since we start with the passion and the next step is, okay, well, how do I make the best of this? What has your approach been to balance the two sports and the training? Do you really focus on one at a time, or is it always kind of a blended approach?
Initially, it was more of a blended approach, and more recently, it's not been a blended approach at all. I'm primarily focused on bodybuilding, and that had to do just simply with some overuse injuries that I experienced. And so I will say that in hindsight, I wish I would have been a little bit more careful with my training and maybe not so gung-ho about both at the same time, because it did lead to some overuse injuries and to some just issues that I still deal with to this day. And I'm actually like relatively tall for my weight class. So I'm 5'7" and I competed in the 72 kilos. So, long arms. So I have shoulder issues from bench and, but I still can bench press now. And I started to have some trap issues from squatting. And so initially it was, both at the same time, which, in hindsight's always 2020. I could go, okay, well, I could have been a little bit smarter about maybe some of the things that I did in that initial start. But at the same time, I'm so grateful for those experiences. And it really gave me a knowledge in both endeavors that led to now helping other people. So I guess for myself, it's been one of those things where at the time it was appropriate to focus on, or it was just really exciting and I wanted to focus on both. But more recently, I just have had some physical limitations. And so I still do some variations of the main lifts, and I love doing strength work still. And so that drive and excitement has carried over into some other lifts, like this is just random, but like Alberto started having me do hyperextensions. And so now I'm like super excited about adding weight to hyperextensions and being like really strong at that. And so it's always that kind of excitement of like pushing myself, which initially started with powerlifting. So it's really that concept of pushing my body, pushing my limits in the gym from powerlifting that carried over into now my bodybuilding focus, more so focus. So, and also too, just wanting to possibly compete another time in the future. I just want to stay as healthy as possible. And right now my priorities are a little bit different since I'm late 20s and I just want to stay healthy and into my 30s and make sure that I'm not sacrificing my health for just wanting to do everything all at once. So I'd say that it's changed a little bit, but yet what I've learned from that is valuable for not only my personal training now, but also training other people and helping them and maybe recommending like, okay, well, let's kind of like talk about what your limitations are. Let's talk about where your mental state is at, and let's formulate the best plan for you, because each person's going to be different. And so that's why, cookie cutter plans really don't, I would say, probably don't bring the best results, because each person has a different life, has a different propensity to injury. I mean, it's just so varied. So I'd say that's what I've really taken away from that.
No, well said. And I think you weren't alone in that. And what I mean by that, and Omar, I would love to get your take on if you agree with me, because I think we observe the same thing in the industry, is that there was like the version 1 DUP that kind of chewed up a lot of people and spit them out in the same time frame that you're talking about, Katie. And it was, and I don't know that it could have gone any different as the focus on the research was exploding at the same time as our basic understanding of what produced strength and what produced hypertrophy. The classic Schoenfeld study that came out that said, hey, you can get the same amount of growth out of doing sets of triples. You just have to do more of them. And then all the power builders were like, easy. I just need to do more triples on squat, bench, and deadlift, and I'm going to get the best of both worlds. And they forget that they also get the bonus hip injury. So I think that I was personally a victim to that. Alberto Nunez is actually the one who calls it like the V1 DUP, because it's improved since then. And I know, having talked to like all of the people who have influenced you, who you've mentioned, like I've seen Zerdos' thoughts evolve. I've seen Lane's thoughts evolve. Ben's thoughts have evolved. I've had these conversations with all of them. And I know that my thoughts have evolved substantially, because I used to be the, captain 5x5 back in the day with primary compound movements. And that I was like best of both worlds. And it's not technically wrong, but at the same time, I'm a 6 foot heavyweight, so I'm a male version of what you experience, and I had back injuries. I had to get hip surgery, and now, as we've talked about numerous times on Iron Culture, I use more of like a minimum dose for the skill and focusing on whatever I'm doing at the time to be kind of the best way to do it. Where back in the day, I used to be like, sweet, we'll go Shaiko 37, and then we'll just do some calf raises, hamstring curls, and bicep curls on top of that, and we're sorted,
Yep.
So, Omar, anyway, do you feel like this has been an industry level evolution of thought? Because I certainly do.
Yeah, man. I think it's been a necessary evolution, because to your point, I think all methodologies should also be evaluated with a time course consideration, where it's like, oh, this will work fantastic for 3 months, 6 months, you're in your early 20s. Like, but what if you do this for several years? And I think because when a program is being sold, once again, it's predicated upon someone doing it and then seeing the instantaneous results. Oh, I've never had this amount of frequency, the specificity. I exploded my squat. So you think, wow, I'm getting the dose response is there. Let me keep doing it. And so it becomes addictive. I also think there's a beauty in simplicity in reducing things down, where it's like, I like to squat, you got to do more volume, therefore I'm going to squat more. And it's not until, the graveyard of people that have done it, such as myself, you, Eric, Katie Ann, so many people, where it's like, well, could there be a better way? And once, Eric, to your point, I think you've been one of the people bringing this up. I mean, we had that video in 2019 about asking for a valid argument to be given if you do the most specific thing for strength, doing your singles, doing, once again, your high intensity work, that could you not just replace some of that requisite volume for hypertrophy with another movement? Can you make a valid argument why it'd be far superior just to keep with that specificity and keep with that barbell movement? If you can't, then why are we sticking with it? And it's like everything else. I think some of it from being on YouTube, it's a little bit reactionary and not necessarily in a bad way. But like I said, when I started in 2009, 2010, you're doing a deadlift, it's seen it. What are you doing? You're going to snap your back up. So people that started coming up with these programs it was that exposure that these are good movements, right? Like, we like to do them. So the deadlift, the squat, these are healthy movements. No, you're not going to snap your shit up if you do them. So it almost was an overcompensation of representation, maybe with some of those movements. And like I said, I had a video in 2013 where I called the leg press stupid. I said, if you want to grow your legs, just squat, right? Like there's the graveyards that we see of some of the things that we've said. So yeah, I think it's a necessary evolution. And I think also we have to consider always the time course of said athlete, because a lot of us, the three of us right here, because we're world champions, united, we're lifers. So once you include that variable, which is you're going to be doing this for a very long time, it changes how you make your choices. And I think everyone will reach that point. I actually, Eric, I think I told you this privately. There is a prominent, let's say, YouTuber who he's in his early 20s, and we're just doing a movement. I said, yeah, I'm going to warm up a little bit. This tricep, could be a little funky, this elbow. And he said, your triceps hurting you, your elbow's hurting you. And he said, like, you're doing something wrong. And I said, or I'm a handful of years older than you, and you're like 23 years, you've been training for 2 years, you just think automatically because you're not injured that you're doing everything right. I said, I'll see you in 5 years, is all I said to him politely.
Yep. Oh yeah. I used to bash the leg press.
Yeah.
Yep.
Eric, what were you gonna say?
I was just going to say, if he's even still lifting.
Yeah, no, dude. Last tangent. The amount of people that have stopped lifting, because we only see, right, it's the survivorship bias. We only see the people that continue to post. So either, it doesn't matter, GUP, whatever methodology, those that keep posting are the only people we see. We need to see the graveyards, okay, folks? We need to see them.
Yeah. I actually know personally a lot of people who have stopped completely lifting because it's just too much. And so, like you said, like having that perspective of being a lifer, like how can we learn from our mistakes and formulate a plan that actually will sustain that, as opposed to just being a part of the graveyard.
Well said. So I would love to get your take, working with others. How has that changed your perspective as an athlete? Or even just how does it change your perspective more broadly?
I would say working with athletes. So I've coached powerlifting and I've coached bodybuilding. I coach a lot of lifestyle. I would say probably the primary thing is every single person needs something a little bit different. And so I have been so impacted by coaches in my life that really cared about me as an individual and really cared about helping me in the best way that they can in order for me to reach my goals or to continue that incremental progress. And so, I mean, another shout out to Alberto. I've been working with him for, I believe it's like almost, 20, maybe three years. It might be 3 years, 29. I don't know. Or 2 years. I don't know. But anyways.
Katie, did you briefly work with Cliff Wilson too?
I did. Yes.
Yeah, that's right. Because I hate to interrupt you, but one thing I'm reflecting on as you're talking is that I think you do being coached right. Like, you seek out people who have knowledge, and you let them mentor you. Like, you've worked with some of the people I really respect in the field. Like, you talked about Lane Norton, Cliff Wilson. Of course, I respect my colleague and brother from another mother, Alberto Nunez. And it seems like, I'm assuming that you have not only just been like, yep, I find someone who I trust who has the credentials and I do what they say, but you have probably become a better coach yourself from working with them. Is that accurate?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. So taking, okay, what was it about that experience that was incredible? And how can I replicate that for my own clients and learn from that and grow as a coach? Because I think a lot of times there's this notion of like, okay, well, it's just knowing the science behind training or the science behind nutrition. I've worked with some of the individuals who really are smart in that regard, but they didn't actually work on knowing me and a relationship and building that and helping me through some personal difficulties or you know, just kind of ups and downs with your training and nutrition that happen. And I've gotten so much more benefit out of, let's say, the less educated but more experienced coach. And so that's really been something that has given me confidence in my own coaching as well, is that the best coaches I've had, some of them, I mean, I've had amazing coaches throughout it and I've learned so much from each one. But I mean, Cliff Wilson, he doesn't have the standard background. Alberto Nunez doesn't either. You know, everyone's different. And so just really having that confidence of someone who believed in me and helped me and really looked at me as a mentee and mentoring me through the process. And I didn't just gain something, you know, a title or gain something physically, but also knowing how to coach others effectively and really use those tools and help other people too. And oh yeah, it's helped me tremendously. And I think my just perspective has changed over the years for sure, from when I first started coaching. So I've been coaching for 5 years now. So, you know, just so over that period of 5 years, it's developed and changed. And I owe a lot of that to the individuals that I work with or have worked with and Alberto currently working with. So yeah, it's been, I'm super blessed to have had the opportunity to work with a lot of these individuals. And I don't take that for granted. It's been amazing.
No, that's awesome. You know, and I actually really am glad that you made the distinction between having scientific knowledge and coaching, because I think too often in the evidence-based community, we define a good coach by being evidence-based. And I think that definition doesn't even hold up to logical scrutiny when you think about it, in my opinion, because we can identify that there were good coaches in, say, the 90s and 80s in their era. You know, like think about John Wooden, you know, a legendary basketball coach, right? And they must have been doing things wrong from an evidence-based perspective because our scientific knowledge has evolved in the last 40 years. So therefore, they have to be separate constructs. And the way I often tell people is that coaching is about relationships. The methods you use should stay up to date with the evidence, but they're two separate things. So if you think you're a good coach just because you read a whole lot of PubMed and a lot of articles, that just means you're well read. But coaching is a skill. And I think that's a really, really important distinction that you made, Katie. So I appreciate that.
Absolutely. Yeah, there is a big difference. And the beauty is when you can kind of marry those two and have the right balance with each one. And, you know, it's always changing too. And there's always more that I can be doing. But that's the exciting thing about it, is like there's never a lack of opportunity for growth in that regard. For
sure. So I have a question about the future, Katie. So you had a pretty stellar year in 2017, obviously, winning your division in the Yorton Cup, winning the overall WMBF Worlds, and also going 9 for 9 and crushing it at the Arnold. It's now 2021. Obviously, everyone's aware for why at least one of those years you probably didn't compete. We had this whole global pandemic thing. But do you see yourself getting back on the stage or the platform, or maybe the platform, and what is in store for you in the future, and where are you at currently, and what do you see moving forward?
I mean, I think this past year has demonstrated to us that life is very unpredictable. So as much as I want to plan out my life, unfortunately, it's not going to always work out that way. And I've always been a huge proponent for long off seasons and regaining just lost muscle, getting to a healthy body fat percentage, especially as a woman, having just normalized and balanced hormones, and also mentally just recovering, because contest prep can definitely take a toll for sure. So I think I've reached the point. I actually last year did a diet during the pandemic. It just happened to line up with that, with Alberto, and I that ended up going so well, and it was the best diet I've ever done. And so it really gave me this like excitement of like, it was just a mini cut. But it was the first time I'd ever dieted since my show. So I took a full 2.5 years off from any sort of deficit and was really trying to regain my health. And so I think that got me to a place where I'm like, ooh, I could do this again. I would say that probably the only way I would compete in a strength sport would just be for fun, just pure fun, and maybe like a local meet or something like that. I mean, who knows in the future though? So I don't want to say, never say never. But in the future, I'm not sure, because the 2017 actually contest prep was very last minute. I actually contacted Cliff Wilson in, I think it was like April of that year, because I didn't even think I was going to compete. I was like, you know what? I'm just going to reach out to him and just see, what he says and see if he thinks I have potential to do this fall and do really well. So I've always been a little bit more so like, I'm very planned and methodical kind of in my life, but when it comes to like my athletic endeavors, I like to just kind of just let happen, like see where I'm led and like, where am I being called to go? And so who knows, but Alberto and I have definitely talked about doing another contest prep. So we'll see. I think it might be fun to win at 25 and then maybe win at 30. So who knows? Who knows? But we'll see. I mean, definitely it's like, I'm like, it's there still for sure, but I just have to like, just kind of see how life goes. And hopefully, as the pandemic is coming to an end and, things are regaining a little bit more normalcy, that might be in the future, but stay tuned. Stay tuned.
I will. I'm very curious to see what the future holds for you. I think it'd be very interesting to see you back on stage, because the competitive landscape has changed a bit. Kind of tangential to that, when you first got into the bodybuilding game, when you decided I want to first compete as a late teen, 18, 19, you mentioned, I don't think there was as many divisions. I think it was pretty much just figure bodybuilding and the fitness dying off, unfortunately. So let me ask you this. If you think you had been born 5-10 years later, would you have considered competing in a different division, or would you think you'd still be in the figure division?
I think I'd still be in figure. The reason being is in natural bodybuilding, you just don't have as many choices as in the non-tested division. So NPC, I feel like they're creating a new division every year. So not really sure about that. And I only coach natural competitors. So for myself, I'm really just in that world. And then myself, I competed in an NPC show in my first season just to kind of get my feet wet in that. But since I'm in the natural realm, it really is more so like, okay, figure or then physique. And I just love the symmetry of figure and the beauty component of it too. It's really fun, even though I would consider myself not so much into like the whole glam thing. It's fun to kind of have that like alter ego on stage and just like really, it's pretty much a beauty pageant with muscles. I mean, it's posing and everything. So I would say probably still figure. I love figure and I love the look of that OG Erin Stern, just gorgeous. Mm-hmm. And I would say that's probably the standard, her physique for what I was trying to achieve in my natural debut and then world title. So yeah.
No, absolutely. And I think you achieved a very high standard, and I'm sure there are people looking up to you now, much like you did with Erin. I would also say, for those who aren't familiar, my perspective on most of the larger natural bodybuilding federations is that as far as what you actually have to achieve physically, there isn't a huge distinction between at least the physique and figure division. You've got to be pretty damn shredded. And you also have to carry a good amount of muscle, and especially like in the muscle groups that are most accentuated to proportion. So like you have to have great delt development, lat development, and quad development to compete in figure. So it's not like that different. But it does sound like for you, bikini would probably not be on the docket. Didn't even come up in that conversation, which I loved. It was like either physique or figure.
Yeah, well, figure's just more my style. I just the posing and the bikini. I have coached competitors in bikini, and respect it for sure, but it's just not something that I would ever do. But definitely have a lot of respect for some of my teammates that have competed in it. I'm sponsored by Core Nutritional, so I have some fellow athletes that compete in bikini, and their physiques are insane. But I'll also say from a genetic standpoint, I just have a kind of more of a blocky waist and bigger quads. And so it's always been more so like working to balance my lower body with my upper body. And so for bikini, that really does not fit at all anyways. I'd actually probably have to stop training legs if I wanted to do that, just because they are looking for more of that silhouette that just doesn't have as much muscle. So yeah, I would say from a genetic standpoint, just what fits my personality figure is where it's at. But to your point, I've actually seen several individuals who have done figure and then also done physique in natural bodybuilding, and that's been interesting to see. So I think a girl that won maybe the WNBF title in physique the year prior to I competed against her, and she was back in figure. So to your point, yeah, that is something that you have to have a ton of muscle. You have to be pretty darn shredded, and a lot of the difference actually comes from the posing and from the presentation. So it's just two different realms, I guess you could say, in terms of what you do on stage and how you present yourself.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear you echo that, because that's definitely what I see in my perspective, having never competed in it, obviously, except for through you, but having been to, God, more shows than I can count, and spectated and coached, of course. So very cool. Yeah. So another question I have would be for people who may be looking to you, much like you once looked to Aaron. What would be your primary advices, as our Saint Arnold would say, for people who want to get into physique sport? One thing I've seen is that you seem very comfortable, at least at this stage, taking time off. And I know a lot of people feel pressure when they compete that they kind of have to, quote unquote, stay in the mix. So, and not that has to be your advice. You give whatever advice you want, but I would love to hear your perspective there.
Honestly, that's one thing, just going off what you said, it just kind of sparked a thought. I would say I see so many people compete too often, and it actually hinders a lot of the progress that they could make. And as a woman, you have to be very mindful of your reproductive system, your hormones, and that can just tank very easily. And a lot of women, I've seen this, have been comfortable with just no longer having a cycle, just completely disregarding their hormonal health. And then 5 years or 2 years down the line, their hair's falling out. They don't, they're just having all kinds of issues. I'll leave it at that, but all kinds of issues. And, it affects too your metabolic rate if you lose your cycle for an extended period. As you guys, I'm sure, and have studied and all that stuff. But I would say, the pressure to be sort of like relevant is one of those new things with social media. And so that is something that I definitely have battled with over the years, and feeling like there's this pressure to perform and to still be relevant and to still be a name or whatever it may be. And it's like taking a step back and thinking, are you doing this with like a long-term perspective, or are you doing it because you just want the likes or you want the follows? And, not that there's anything wrong with having a following at all or having popularity, but is that the drive for is that your motivation for competing? Or is it actually a true desire for lifting and for athleticism and really having this passion for the sport? And so I would encourage everyone who maybe is thinking about, if you're new to the sport, think about, okay, what is like the long-term perspective? And do I need to spend extended time in caloric surplus and gaining that muscle? Because my weight in the off season has changed dramatically over the years. And so that's something to, as much as I still I'm not completely immune to the scale and just being like, oh my gosh, I weigh that much. But at the same time, if you want to do well in this sport, you have to be adding lean body mass, and you can't be just stagnating and maybe going down because you feel this pressure to just be relevant and post pictures on social media. It's like, okay, so you're doing worse in the show because you just want a picture to post or a trophy or whatever it may be. Like, think about the long-term ramifications, because I've seen a lot of very negative consequences from that desire to just compete and compete and compete and compete. Like, think about long-term. And that's where having a coach can really come in and be beneficial. Because I'll say Alberto pushed me to gain more weight than I was comfortable with, but it was the best thing that I did, because it just, my health got so much better. And just from big picture perspective, I am so much more, my system is so much more resilient now for a future diet than it was, like, let's say 3 years ago. So long-term perspective, big picture perspective. And bodybuilding, as amazing as it is, powerlifting, as amazing as it is, it's not your life. That's not your life. You have so many other aspects to your life. So, like, big picture perspective, and how does that fit in?
Oh, I think that's fantastic. And it's, having been someone who got into bodybuilding and powerlifting pre-social media, and now seeing how it's changed, I don't necessarily envy people who got into it 5, 6, 7 years later than when I did, or even just a few years later than when you did. I guess, let me ask you that, as someone who has been in the sport before kind of Instagram and social media exploded, have you felt that pressure be something harder to manage over time? Or because you have the perspective looking back, maybe you don't see it as the same kind of pressure? I don't know.
Right. Well, I'm actually super grateful that I had zero following. I had zero social media, really. I just had like a personal Instagram, and nothing else when I first started, because I didn't really care what other people, I wasn't getting these comments from someone who I don't even know, and they're making comments about my journey, or kind of this whole just social media click sort of thing that goes on with a lot of forums and different comments made and all sorts of stuff. So I'm super grateful that I actually didn't have that. So to kind of echo what you said, Eric, just I kind of got in on like the very beginning of all that craziness. So that was awesome. I think for sure, because I just was looking at it just from my perspective with, okay, what do I want to do? Not allowing the outside influences impact me. And it definitely became challenging. For sure, especially in 2017, when I competed in powerlifting and then decided to shift gears and then go into bodybuilding. I mean, I probably received hundreds of comments of like, I miss powerlifting, Katie. When are you going to power? All of this sort of like feedback from people that I don't even know. And so I remember one time I got snarky and I was like, well, you don't even know powerlifting, Katie, so why don't you stop making comments? But, just that sort of pressure, questions. And as I'm sure both of you can relate to, it's like a lot of these, even if you don't know someone and they make a real nasty video about you or comment or question you, it still stings. And so it's easy to let that definitely affect, I think, your decisions moving forward. And so I think that's why it's important to have people in your life that are going to be real with you and that are going to say, hey, like, you need to take time away from competing because it's unhealthy at this point, or you need to gain weight because you need to actually spend extended time in a caloric surplus and not in a deficit all the time and constantly. So having individuals who can be real with you and who aren't just going to tell you what you want to hear or, sort of just compliment you, or it's kind of like, it's interesting. There's like this dichotomy. It's like you have people who are just telling you what you want to hear, and then you have these random people on the internet who are criticizing you. And it's like, how do you navigate that? And I don't think it's like something as humans, we were ever designed to navigate this social media world, because it's just insane. So, just having that perspective of like, okay, maybe don't even read the comments, or don't, pay attention to that, as hard as it may be, and practice that for sure. It takes a lot of time. I think I'm better than I've ever been, but I will say I'm not immune to that, that feedback or criticism or whatever it may be coming from the internet or the social media world.
That's well said. And like, Omar, I think I want to, like, your perspective, I'd love to hear on this. It's a bit of a tangent, but I think it's really relevant to what you just said, Katie. I remember when I first, like, for me, my first exposure was Matt Ogus being like, hey, come on my channel. And I didn't realize what I was signing up for. I thought, oh, this is a great opportunity to have a larger platform to educate. And oh, cool, this will help, 3DMJ get some more exposure. I didn't realize that I would have people... Like, I remember, this is back when I was terrible at managing this and I had no idea it was coming. I went to go check the comments on like my first or second Muscle and Strength Pyramid nutrition video in like 2012, and the most upvoted or most watched comment was people making fun of the sweater I was wearing, and I was like, what the hell? Like this is like, come on, you know? And that bothered me to like, I could tell how much it bothered me, and I was like, this is ridiculous. Why is this bothering me so much? And I think it was just because I got blindsided. I didn't realize that's what I was signing up for. So I don't know, Omar, how that is you, because you got into the YouTube scene very early.
Yeah, man. So I think I kind of grew with it, meaning that in 2009, the audience it was non-existent in fitness when I first started. So you get the occasional comment, this, that, the other thing. And so gradually over time, there was, you know, the hardening of said shell, in addition to just being a sociopath. But I think it's kind of like similar to Eric, though. I will say, when you said about, I think it's
so ethnic slurs against Omar Yusuf, they roll right off. He's a sociopath, folks.
Yeah. You just gotta, you know, regard all of them. It's like, you know what, you know nothing, and my mom says I'm cool, so it's actually okay. No, but for I think different people experience different things throughout time, and so I'm like, this is. Man, compared to what I've experienced, this ain't nothing. And one, to the anonymity, you know, it emboldens people. So you can't take it seriously. But also, a degree of arrogance, honestly, I think serves someone well. Like my dude, Eric, where you said, I think it was a birthday party and there was a magic trick and you wanted to know what the hell's going on behind the scenes because you're like, wait a second, like, you're not telling me everything. I actually distinctly remember this, maybe it was grade 3, grade 4. Math teacher problem was a math problem. She wrote the wrong answer. I tried to correct her and say like, hey, I actually think it's this number. And she was indignant on it. And she was wrong. And when I saw that and I saw her break character where she got infuriated because she was getting, I just said, hey, like, I actually think it's like whatever, it's like 81 or whatever. And she got so mad where it's like, well, wait a second, this authority figure actually doesn't know what they're talking about all the time. More than that, they're actually trying to chastise me for saying something. F all this. It's like, run your own. And then I remember this. This is actually funny. This is a true story. Like, this is the origin, I joke, of the sociopath. But just the teacher wrote like a comment on the report card, like, you get your grades, which are objective. You do the test, it's objective. Then you get like the personality report that we got for some reason. Like, you know, you talk too often, this and that. Is like, she wrote like, Omar needs to listen to the teacher more, like straight up. Like, that's what she said. And my mom responded back, Omar marches and will always march to the beat of his own drum, and just wrote that back in the report card. When you're given a license to ill by your parents, ain't nobody can stop you. So you come with that smoke, Eric, to YouTube. I had no business. So this is the thing. It's arrogance, sociopathy, a bunch of other things. You saw, Eric has seen, in 2009, I was wearing a tight white spandex shirt. I had no business wearing it. Let's be honest. I was, Eric, 155 pounds soaking wet, bro?
I was wearing literally the same shirt. I think you
no,
actually
but you were 40 pounds heavier and you look way better. Like, you actually had muscle. This is the problem, is what I'm saying. So that's a super long tangent to say that, truthfully, I think some people are better suited, just either life experiences, attitude. I do think it favors, whether or not you're a good person or not, it favors certain personality types, right, where you're willing to go forth, and maybe you have such a belief in what you're doing that some people have the negativity bias. Like, if you've been told your whole life, like, hey, like, it's nothing but sunshine and butterflies, and you go to social media and someone's like, you're fat, and you're like, oh, you said that? Or you're used to, like, growing up, like, you kind of come whatnot growing up and people say certain things, so you're used to it, and you're like, that's all you got? Like, that's all you got is what you're thinking? Yeah. And I was fortunate to grow with my social media. So like I said, you have 300 subscribers, you get one weird comment. Then you get 500 subscribers, 2,000. So you grow up. Unfortunately, with people now, you could go from like 0 subscribers to millions. So you go from like everybody loves you to getting death threats in a year. And that's like just different, you know? Like, I got my first stalker letter like way back in 2011. Bro, I've been over it. Okay, I've already gone through the motions. Yeah.
True.
Well,
True.
I was a more fragile man than you were, Omar.
No,
let's just put it
no,
that
you
way.
weren't.
That sweater broke my heart. Because while you were popping your collar, your leather jacket in 4th grade, I was just walking behind the stage at that magic show because I didn't believe it. I had the natural skeptic. I was not a 4th grade James Dean like you were. So a little different. So yeah, I struggled, but I came out on the other side, folks. And hey, Katie, I'm glad you did too. And it is very exciting to hear that you're probably going to be back in the mix and hopefully mentally and physically healthier. So yeah. So to come full circle, Omar, go for it.
I want to say, because I feel like we were really united here. So what better choice of action can I do other than try and divide everything? And I want to ask you, Katie Ann, because things are comparative in our society, okay? It doesn't matter how much I earn, it's how much you earn relative to me, and I have to make sure I earn more, or like whatever, right? So we want to talk about bodybuilding and powerlifting now, because people say, what's your favorite drink? They'll say Pepsi or Coke. I'll say, Eric, who do you love more, me or your wife? Like, these are things that people need to know, I need to know where I stand. So I want to ask you this, in all seriousness, just in the moment of, because one occurred before the other, and I think I haven't experienced them, being serious for a second. I haven't experienced the exhilaration of winning a junior nationals and also winning the Jordan Cup. They're completely different. How did those two feel comparatively, and was one feeling sweeter than the other? This is not, let me be clear, anyone listening, it's like, this isn't a bodybuilding versus powerlifting. It is, but it's just, those two accomplishments, like what meant more? I'm curious in that moment. Your first one, like the powerlifting, or like kind of Jordan Cup?
Yeah. Okay. So I will say that the junior national title was special because it was my first title. So I was like, what the heck? I was like, what just happened? So it was more like disbelief. And then I would say, like, my WNBF title, I still had disbelief, but it was a world title. So that was sweeter for sure. Like, I was just like in so much shock. And the first one, the junior national title, I say it was exhilarating because it was my first one, but like comparing that to a world title, I mean, definitely the world title. Ooh. So sorry, powerlifters.
Bodybuilding, what up?
Woo!
You never forget your first, but WNBF Worlds is WNBF Worlds.
Yeah, that was pretty amazing. It was, and I still like can envision it. And I mean, I guess I can think about both, but actually, fun fact, my junior title, Ben Escrow handled me. So, and I still remember, this is hilarious. I still remember the last deadlift. He looked at me and he said, Katie, go out there. My mom is underneath that deadlift and you need to lift it up.
Like your mom, not Ben's mom, right?
No, it was Ben's mom.
Someone's mom. I don't know. Someone's mom was underneath a car. He said, and you're lifting the car off of them. And I was like, yes, sir. And I just went up there. And it was, I still can remember that. Something about lifting a car off a mom. I don't know if it was his mom or my mom. I think it was my mom, but I don't know. Yeah. But I just, it was like comic relief. And also like, I was terrified. I was like, yes, sir. He was like so passionate at that moment. And that was a fun moment. But I'll always remember that.
This is why Eric and myself are pieces of shit. Because we would someone would tell us that and we would just start laughing. It's like, well, there goes my third deadlift.
Yeah, I would have pretended to mishear them and been like, you want me to lift your mom? She weighs that much? And I'm like, did you go out there? The bar's loaded. So,
yeah. Yeah, good times. Amazing. Good times.
Wow. Well, we've covered so much from deadlifting cars off of mothers to unnecessarily pitting bodybuilding against powerlifting to crying about how really irrelevant to this whole conversation, how people made fun of my sweater. I want to bring it full circle and ask you, Katie, is there anything that you feel we should bring into this conversation for the listeners? Anything that you want them to know about advice moving forward, coaching, competing, bodybuilding, powerlifting? The floor is yours.
Yeah, I would say probably the biggest lesson through all of these endeavors has been the hard times really have grown perseverance in me and resilience. And looking back, it's like in any sort of endeavor, really the hard times are what build your character. And so, if you are, and your listeners are passionate about lifting or passionate about training or whatever it may be, like, go full force. But remember, like, when you hit bumps in the road, like, that's really when you're going to build your character, your perseverance, learn, and then have endurance for the future. And so when I think about like just my journeys and powerlifting and bodybuilding and all those things, like, the greatest benefit to that is actually refining the person I am, not necessarily the athlete or the coach or whatever it may be. It's like the actual person that I have become. And of course, you know, we all have improvements we can make until we die, but that journey and that just ups and downs and, you know, the stress and kind of like, there's just so many things that happen like throughout that, but it's really those like difficult moments that gave me just taught me so many lessons. And so, you know, looking at any journey, I think taking like, okay, it may be bodybuilding, it may be powerlifting, it may be weightlifting, but like, what can you take out of that to be a better human, a better wife, you know, father, son, whatever it may be, better friend to your friends. I mean, that's truly like what we're called to do, is to be better for other people and help other people. And so how can you use this endeavor and then really build that resilience, that perseverance and endurance to run the race of the rest of your life, not just that athletic endeavor, because it may not last for forever, but that's okay, because you can learn things from it and take that and catapult into something else.
Articulate, truth, just clear connection to the Iron Culture mission statement of using lifting as a vehicle for life. The failed slogan that Omar hates, the meaning of lift, that I have coined, hashtag meaning of lift. Please put that out there anytime you talk about Iron Culture. I just want to say thank you so much for those insightful words, Katie, and for everything you shared and taking your time out of your day to talk to both of us and to all of our listeners. And with that, Omar, I'm going to hand it over to you so you can ride us out into the sunset, deadlifting things off of mothers.
I'm still thinking about that. Katie, and we want to thank you for being on Iron Culture. We've linked all your social media in the description for those to check out. We want to thank everyone for listening to another fantastic episode. Dual athletes, that's how we get it done. You heard it here first at the top of the hierarchy. Bodybuilding, ain't no surprise if you've been listening for a long period of time. Last but not least, you must do your duty here and leave a rating and review on iTunes. Help out the algorithm. We're fighting, those big corporate cabals, and we intend on winning, getting that Joe Rogan money. You can leave any rating review you want, but we know the one review we want, the one rating, it's not 5-star. And we'll see everyone back next Monday and the Monday after, and maybe even the Monday after that one.